In the shadowed forest, Mu Chun sat cross-legged in silence. His eyes were slightly closed, and a faint light radiated from the jade plate in his palm. A powerful spiritual energy enveloped the plate, and on its surface, the intricate light runes seemed to subtly shift, undergoing minor changes. These alterations gradually enhanced the spirit array on the plate, making it more complete. Mu Chun had an exceptional talent for spirit arrays. When his inner eye was open, he could quickly understand the array within the plate, which wasn't overly complicated, but was extraordinarily clever, allowing him to correct its flaws. The light on the jade plate continued for about 10 minutes, after which Mu Chun slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the now brighter plate in his hand, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Is it done? Luoli and Wen Qingxuan, who were nearby, both looked over. Mu Chun nodded and handed the jade plate to Luoli. As she took it, her spiritual power surged from within her, and her beautiful eyes sparkled with delight. As expected, it has completely sealed off the influence of the forbidden spirit array on our spiritual power. With this plate, we can use our spiritual energy without any worries. Can you make 2 more? Wen Qingxuan asked impatiently. The weakness of not being able to use spiritual power was unbearable. It can be done, but in such a hurry, the results might not be as good, Mu Chun replied. That's fine. As long as we can use our spiritual energy, these things are useless in my eyes, Wen Qingxuan said, her voice tinged with coldness as she clenched her delicate hand. It was clear that Qin Feng's actions had angered her earlier. Mu Chun chuckled and nodded, knowing that offending Wen Qingxuan meant Qin Feng and the others would have it even worse. With a wave of his hand, 2 more jade plates appeared. Closing his eyes again, spiritual energy surged as intricate light runes slowly formed on the plates. It took nearly half an hour to craft the 2 new plates. Once they were completed, Mu Chun opened his eyes and handed them to Luoli and Wen Qingxuan. These 2 are a bit rushed, so they might not be as perfect as the first one, but they should let you use about 70% of your spiritual energy. That's enough, Wen Qingxuan said, taking them and adding, let's go. We need to get to the spirit treasury hall quickly. Once we're there, leave everything to me. Without waiting for Mu Chun to respond, she turned and shot off towards the deeper part of the forest. Now that she could use her spiritual power again, her strength was vastly different from before. Her speed left Mu Chun a little stunned. Mu Chun smiled and nodded at Luoli. The 2 of them quickly followed. Meanwhile, outside the spirit treasury hall, Mou watched with surprise as Qin Feng and the others returned in a disheveled state. He frowned and asked, what happened? We fell into Mu Chen's hands. Qin Feng wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, his face grim. He can't use spiritual energy. How are you not his match? Mou asked in shock. His physical body is incredibly strong and strange. It seems like he has some power inside him besides spiritual energy. Qin Feng gritted his teeth. Then he hesitated before adding, I also lost my spirit protection jade plate to him. What? Lu Xiong's face changed immediately. The reason they could act so recklessly here was because they could use spiritual energy. Even facing Mu Chun and Wen Qingxuan, they hadn't been afraid. But now, Qin Feng had lost the jade plate? That meant their greatest advantage was gone. Mou's expression darkened slightly, and his eyes became colder. What do we do now? Lu Xiong asked Mou. Mu Chun and the others are probably on their way here. Don't worry, Mou said, his eyes flashing briefly. He shook his head and continued, the jade plates you have were rushed, so they aren't perfect. Even if Mu Chun gets them, they can only channel 50% of the spiritual energy. It's nothing to worry about. Besides, the seal is about to be broken. As long as Big Brother's plan works, we should be able to control the spirit array here. When we gather everyone's strength, even Mu Chun and the others won't be able to do anything to us. Bring everyone here. Mou gave the command, and immediately, the light disc in his hand shot out a beam of light again, illuminating the seal outside the spirit treasury hall, causing the lines of light to quickly dissolve. Qin Feng and Lu Xiong nodded, then gestured with their hands. One after another, figures swiftly emerged from the surrounding forest, gathering outside the spirit treasury hall. A dark sea of figures formed, all their eyes full of tension and vigilance, staring at the dark forest path. The entire area fell into an eerie silence, with only the sound of heavy breathing echoing in the stillness. Rustle. Time passed slowly, and suddenly, faint footsteps were heard from the quiet forest. Qin Feng and Lu Xiong's eyes narrowed sharply. They looked toward the shadowy forest, where the footsteps grew louder and clearer, until 3 figures emerged from the shadows, stepping into the open by the thorn iron tree. Heh, quite a grand setup, Mu Chen said with a slight smile, observing the tense crowd before him. Beside him, Luo Li and Wen Qingxuan both shot cold glances at the scene. Mu Chen, don't get cocky. Do you really think with this spirit protection jade disc, you can handle us? Qin Feng glared fiercely at Mu Chen, saying, that spirit protection jade disc of mine can only let you channel 50% of your spiritual power. With your physical body tribulation level, do you really think you can take all of us down? So, it's called the spirit protection jade disc, Mu Chen chuckled. He stepped forward amidst the watchful gazes, a mocking smile tugging at his lips. With a sudden motion, his palm clenched, and immense spiritual energy surged like a storm. Seems you've misunderstood. This spirit protection jade disc allows me to fully unleash my spiritual power. Qin Feng and Lu Xiong's expressions changed drastically, staring in disbelief at the overwhelming spiritual energy surrounding Mu Chen. Impossible! Qin Feng exclaimed in shock. As the owner of the jade disc, he knew its effects well. It was an incomplete spiritual array that could never allow one to fully harness their spiritual power. Nothing is impossible. I've just perfected the spirit protection jade disc, Mu Chen said with a smile. And I even made 2 temporary versions. As his words fell, Luo Li and Wen Qingxuan also released their immense spiritual power, causing fierce winds to whip through the air. Qin Feng and Lu Xiong's faces turned pale, their eyes filled with terror. They could hardly believe that Mu Chen had not only perfected the spirit protection jade disc in such a short time but had also created 2 more. Did this mean that even Luo Li and Wen Qingxuan had regained some of their power? Thanks for giving us the spirit protection jade disc. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do this, Mu Chen said with a smile at Qin Feng, who felt a sudden taste of blood rise in his throat at the sight of that grin. In front of them, the members of the Alliance of Academies, under the pressure of the overwhelming spiritual power, were retreating with pale faces. The fighting spirit they had earlier vanished completely. They knew that once Mu Chen and his group could channel their spiritual power, they would stand no chance against them. Seems you have great skill in spiritual arrays as well. A cold voice suddenly sounded, and Mou slowly turned around. His icy gaze locked onto Mu Chen, and he spoke slowly. Mu Chen looked at the second leader of the Alliance of Academies, smiled, and said, there should be someone in your alliance with great mastery of spiritual arrays, right? Perhaps it's that mysterious Grand Leader? Isn't he here? If Big Brother were here, do you think you could be so arrogant? Qin Feng gritted his teeth. Rarely do I meet such an excellent spiritual array master. I always want to see more, Mu Chen replied indifferently. You will have the chance. Just by then, your outcome might not be so favorable, Mou said, his tone equally indifferent. That's something to look forward to, Mu Chen grinned. But for now, it seems it's your turn to have a bad outcome. Mu Chen, if you leave now, our Alliance of Academies can erase all grudges with you, and we will never trouble you again. It's better to have one more friend than one more enemy. What do you think? Mou spoke slowly. It's too late, Mu Chen sighed lightly. Humph, you're asking for trouble, Lu Xiong snorted coldly. Do you really think you 3 can handle us? You're wrong. A faint voice came from the side, but it wasn't from Mu Chen. Instead, Wen Qingxuan, her delicate face cold, slowly walked forward. Her black robe had long since been shed, revealing her golden battle armor, which accentuated her graceful and enchanting figure. With her jade-like hand gripping the battle spear tightly, she slowly raised the spear's tip, pointing it directly at Mou and his group. Her voice, cold yet carrying an air of arrogance, spread throughout the forest clearing. I can take all of you on by myself? As soon as her words fell, brilliant golden light erupted from her body, dazzling and intense. In the shimmering glow, a faint image of a phoenix with golden wings seemed to take shape behind her. A noble and domineering aura suddenly emanated from her. The former champion of the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition was finally ready to strike. The radiant golden light spread out beyond the Spirit Treasury Hall, and Wen Qingxuan, holding her golden spear, stood with an expression cold as frost. Her face, as beautiful as a national treasure, was now tainted with a hint of frost. The overwhelming spiritual power around her formed a massive spiritual pressure, crashing towards the alliance of academies like a tidal wave. Faced with the immense pressure from Wen Qingxuan, the members of the alliance of academies began to tremble, their fighting spirit vanishing. Mou's expression shifted slightly. He quickly composed himself and said in a low voice, "Wen Qingxuan, don't go too far. The Alliance of Academies has never offended your 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy. Why must you be so aggressive? I simply find you all displeasing," Wen Qingxuan replied coldly. "You." A flash of anger crossed Mou's eyes, but he quickly sneered and said darkly, "Wen Qingxuan, you may be powerful, but that doesn't mean our older brother is afraid of you. An insidious coward like you thinks you can intimidate me?" Wen Qingxuan snickered. Then with a graceful movement, she took a step forward. Golden light surged around her, resembling a magnificent golden phoenix. The golden spear she held emitted a blinding glow, turning into a sea of spear shadows that swept toward the members of the Alliance of Academies. Bang! Bang! With Wen Qingxuan's strength, ordinary people couldn't possibly stop her, let alone when she could now tap into a portion of her spiritual energy. The members of the Alliance, who had no spiritual power, stood no chance. Their physiques were no match for her. As the golden light passed through, the members of the Alliance of Academies began to flee in panic. One by one, they were struck by the spear shadows, spurting blood and crashing to the ground. In just a few seconds, the once numerous Alliance forces had collapsed in disarray. "Wen Qingxuan, you've gone too far." Mou's face darkened as he yelled angrily. Slamming his foot down, he shot into the air, and a powerful wave of spiritual energy surged from his body. With a swift motion, he formed a massive sword shadow in his palm, which shot toward Wen Qingxuan with brutal precision. Humph! Chen, witnessing Mou's unleashed spiritual power, couldn't help but gasp in surprise. He could feel that Mou had released all of his spiritual energy, unlike Qin Feng, who had only activated half of his power earlier. It was clear that the Spirit Protection Jade Disc on Mou was more complete than Qin Feng's. Humph! Wen Qingxuan raised her phoenix-like eyes and looked at the sword strike coming from Mou, which was as fast as lightning. With a cold snort, she gripped her golden spear tightly. In an instant, a dazzling light burst from it, accompanied by a clear sound of a phoenix's cry that seemed to echo in the air. Golden Phoenix Spear. The golden spear shot out, resembling a golden phoenix soaring through the sky, its blinding light clashing directly with the massive, hard, and brutal sword strike. Clang! The sharp sound of gold meeting iron rang out, and a terrifying gust of wind erupted at the point of contact. The ground beneath them instantly cracked, with deep ruts torn into it by the collision of spear and sword. Boom! The sword shadow exploded in an instant. Mou's body trembled violently, and he staggered back. A trail of blood appeared on his palm, dripping down his fingers. Clearly, in the clash with Wen Qingxuan, he had fallen into a disadvantage. Divine Soul Tribulation? Looking at the blood on his hand, Mou's face darkened as he glared at Wen Qingxuan and said, "No wonder you were once the top-ranked team." Mou's own strength was just one step away from overcoming the Divine Soul Tribulation. Experts who only faced ordinary spiritual energy tribulations were no match for him. However, in the very moment of their confrontation, he was injured by Wen Qingxuan, clearly indicating that her power had far surpassed his. Upon hearing Mou's words, Qin Feng and Lu Xiong's expressions changed, both of them looking with some fear at Wen Qingxuan, whose face remained calm. Had she already passed the Divine Soul Tribulation? That was terrifying. "Take your people and get out of here," Wen Qingxuan said softly, gripping her long spear. Mou, Qin Feng, and Lu Xiong all looked grim. They exchanged glances and saw the chilling intent in each other's eyes. The Spirit Treasury Hall housed the supreme spiritual liquid, and if they could obtain even a single drop, it would help them break through the divine soul tribulation. So how could they leave? Then let's see what makes you think you have the right to say such things, Mou sneered. With a flick of his sleeve, a beam of light shot out. In an instant, the light surged, expanding into a massive greenwood statue. Within it, immense spiritual power radiated outward. Would God guard? Upon seeing the familiar greenwood statue, Mu Chen's eyes narrowed. Mou and the others also possessed a wood god guard? Wen Qingxuan, this wood god guard also has the strength to withstand the divine soul tribulation. Do you want to test its power? With the wood god guard summoned, Mou's confidence grew. He sneered, "You think you can stop me with a piece of wood?" When Qingxuan gripped her golden war spear tightly, a chill flashing in her phoenix eyes. "I'll handle this wood god guard," Mu Chen suddenly spoke, laughing. "Seeking death," Mou mocked, but he didn't know that Mu Chen had already used his power to defeat a battle puppet that also possessed the strength of a first-level divine soul tribulation at Spirit Treasure Mountain. Even though Mu Chen's strength was only at the physical body tribulation level, he had some tricks up his sleeve. "This doesn't require me to do it personally." Mu Chen grinned at Mou, then flicked his sleeve. A beam of light shot out and grew rapidly, transforming into another massive wood god guard, one that was no smaller than Mou's. "Perfect. I happen to have one of the same thing. I wonder which one is stronger." Mu Chen smiled as he looked at the increasingly grim-faced Mou. "Damn it, he has a wood god guard too?" Qin Feng and Lu Xiong's faces turned pale. They never expected that Mu Chen would possess a wood god guard as well, meaning that one of their most powerful trump cards had just been neutralized. When Qingxuan also glanced at Mu Chen in surprise, clearly unaware that he had hidden such a card. A puppet capable of matching a first-level divine soul tribulation was indeed quite imposing. Mou gritted his teeth, then waved his hand. His wood god guard, moving with the force of an earthquake, charged toward Wen Qingxuan. "Heh, let the big guys deal with each other. Why bother fighting a girl?" Mu Chen smiled faintly. With a thought, his wood god guard, like a giant, rushed forward, its massive fists glowing with green light, slamming into the enemy's wood god guard. Boom! The two colossal figures collided, erupting into a fierce battle. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Seeing this, when Qingxuan gave Mu Chen a slight nod before her cold gaze turned back to Mou and the others. Gold light surged again from her battle spear. "What should we do?" Qin Feng and the others' faces turned pale. With Wen Qingxuan's strength, even if the three of them joined forces, they probably wouldn't be a match for her. Moreover, with Mu Chen and Luo Li watching from the sidelines, their numerical advantage had become a burden due to the unique nature of this place. Mou's eyes darkened, but he didn't seem panicked. He glanced at the Spirit Treasury Hall behind him, then muttered, "It should be about time. Everyone, take your positions as we discussed earlier." Mou waved his hand and coldly ordered. The originally unmotivated members of the Alliance of Academies were energized at his command. They quickly withdrew, retreating to the edge of the Spirit Treasury Hall, where stone platforms jutted out. They all sat down on them. Mou let out a cold laugh, then placed his palm against a greenwood pillar in the Spirit Treasury Hall. The immense spiritual energy surged into the pillar, and ancient runes of green light immediately appeared on its surface, spreading out at an astonishing speed. Ha! At the same time, the members of the Alliance of Academies, seated on the stone platforms around the Spirit Treasury Hall, all shouted in unison, placing their palms on the stone. The glow surged, and their spiritual energy flowed into the stone platforms. Finally, the energy roared, and the entire Spirit Treasury Hall erupted with a blinding light. This sudden change took Mu Chen and the others by surprise. Wen Qingxuan's face turned cold, and she quickly unleashed a sharp golden light from her golden war spear. However, as soon as this golden light entered the Spirit Treasury Hall's range, it was completely blocked by the spreading green light. The glow surrounding the Spirit Treasury Hall grew brighter, while the members of the Alliance of Academies, seated on the stone platforms, became increasingly pale. Mou ignored his pale companions, instead casting a cold gaze at Mu Qian and the others, his eyes filled with a chilling, murderous intent. Mu Qian, you should regret coming here. Mou sneered, the smile on his face turning grotesque. He placed both hands on the ancient greenwood pillar before him, pouring all his spiritual energy into it. Buzz. The vast spiritual energy suddenly began to gather frantically in front of the spirit treasury hall, eventually forming a vague, shadowy figure. A powerful wave of energy emanated from this figure, causing Mu Qian and the others to change their expressions. This is the hall spirit that guards the spirit treasury hall. Once summoned, it automatically eradicates all living beings outside the protective boundary of the hall. Only those within the hall's range are safe from attack. Mou smiled sinisterly, looking at Mu Qian and his companions with triumph in his eyes. And now, you will become its prey. Mu Qian, the last laugh won't be yours. Outside the spirit treasury hall, the light and shadow slowly began to take shape. As the figure materialized, everyone could feel an incredibly powerful wave of spiritual energy spreading like a tidal wave. The pressure from the energy seemed to freeze the very air around them. Mu Qian, Luo Li, and Wen Qingxuan's expressions grew grave as they realized the unexpected turn of events. None of them had anticipated that the alliance of academies had such a trump card hidden away. This hall spirit strength is likely enough to crush even a first-level divine soul tribulation expert, Luo Li said, her delicate hand tightening around the Luo godsword, her face filled with concern. Mu Qian nodded lightly, his brow furrowed. The situation had suddenly become extremely difficult. The energy fluctuations from the hall spirit were far beyond the capabilities of an ordinary divine soul tribulation expert. Haha, Mu Qian, what do you think now? No matter how strong you are, you were still outplayed, Mou laughed. Standing inside the spirit treasury hall, he looked at the grim-faced trio, unable to hide the smugness in his voice. With this trump card, even if Mu Qian and his companions were powerful, they stood no chance. You say the hall spirit will indiscriminately purge everyone outside the spirit treasury hall's protection? But even if you get your hands on the treasures here, are you planning to stay inside forever? Mu Qian suddenly asked, staring at Mou. Mou's eyes narrowed slightly. He hadn't expected Mu Qian to figure out their predicament so quickly. As Mu Qian had pointed out, while they had summoned the hall spirit, they could not control it. They were currently within the spirit treasury hall's protective range, so the hall spirit wouldn't attack them. But once they stepped outside, they would become targets. You needn't worry about that, Mou sneered coldly. While it was indeed a problem, his top priority was still to eliminate Mu Qian and the others. During their exchange, the hall spirit, hovering in midair above the spirit treasury hall, suddenly had its eyes glow with intense light. Its gaze swept across the area, locking onto Mu Qian and his companions. Then, a hollow, raspy voice came from its mouth. Those who trespass on sacred ground shall be slain without mercy. Be careful. Just as its voice echoed, Mu Qian's face changed drastically, and he warned sharply. The hall spirit's presence surrounded them. It was as if a spiritual energy storm had erupted. In a flash of light, its form appeared before Wen Qingxuan, and its palm, glowing with endless brilliance, struck down with the force of a hurricane, unleashing a powerful wave of spiritual energy without mercy. Boom! The air exploded beneath the impact of the palm, and even the space around them seemed to warp. Wen Qingxuan, aware of the hall spirit's strength, immediately tightened her expression. The golden war spear burst forth in a brilliant golden light, transforming into a sharp beam of light as clear as a phoenix's cry, striking the hall spirit's palm with lightning speed. Bang! At the moment of collision, a terrifying wave of spiritual energy surged outward. Wen Qingxuan's delicate body shuddered, and she was sent flying backward. Mu Qian's figure appeared behind her just then. His palm pressed against her shoulder, but the force from the impact surged into his body, leaving a trail of blood across his arm. The hall spirit's face was hollow. With a wave of its hand, a spiritual energy lash shot out like a glowing rainbow, enveloping Mu Qian and Wen Qingxuan. Whoosh! A colossal, sharp sword light swept from behind, colliding with the spiritual energy lash. The force of the impact sent spiritual sword energy rampaging through the ground, creating countless cracks. Luo Li's slender form flashed, appearing next to Wen Qingxuan. The Luo god's sword in her hand radiated a fierce sword intent, locking onto the hall spirit like a looming threat. This hall spirit might possess the strength of a triple divine soul tribulation, Wen Qingxuan murmured. Mu Chen and Luo Li's expressions shifted slightly at her words. The hall spirit's strength was far greater than they had imagined. With the power of a triple divine soul tribulation, this was not something they could easily contend with. Even if they managed to win with all their hidden cards, the price would be steep. But that moment would likely be exactly what Mou and the others most wanted to see. What should we do? Luo Li asked, turning to Mu Chen in a low voice. Wen Qingxuan also looked at him. The hall spirit's strength exceeded their expectations, and if the battle dragged on, it wouldn't bode well for them. With the forbidden spirit array in place, neither she nor Luo Li could fully unleash their power. Retreat. Mu Chen's eyes flashed, and without hesitation, he gave the order. The situation had spiraled out of control. No matter how many tricks they had, facing a hall spirit with triple divine soul tribulation strength would come at a massive cost. In such a situation, even though they were reluctant, retreat was their only option. Luo Li nodded without hesitation, but when Qingxuan gave one last unwilling glance at Qin Feng and the others, who stood in the protection of the spirit treasury hall, their faces full of mockery and pride. Boom! Just as the three of them had reached a unanimous decision to retreat, the hall spirit didn't intend to let them off so easily. Its figure flashed, appearing in midair. A surge of spiritual energy gathered in its palm, forming an enormous spiritual energy seal. The seal appeared verdant, like the green wood of a tree, inscribed with mysterious runes. Greenwood Mountain Sealing Seal. The hollow, hoarse voice of the hall spirit echoed as the light seal expanded rapidly, growing to several hundred feet in size, nearly covering the entire open space. Mu Chen's expression changed drastically. The hall spirit seemed to have sensed their intention to retreat and was now attacking with full force. Such an attack could force even a cultivator at the first level of divine soul tribulation to retreat. You two go first, Mu Chen said in a deep voice, black lightning flashing across his body as the sound of thunder rumbled from within him. This is not your place to decide. Wen Qingxuan coldly responded. She had a strong-willed nature and never liked standing behind a man. Since entering the area, Mu Chen had already helped her several times. Now, she wasn't about to let him stay behind and risk his life. Mu Chen gave her a glance but said nothing. He suddenly reached out, grabbing her soft shoulder, and with a surge of spiritual energy, sent her flying toward the thornbush forest. You! Wen Qingxuan, in midair, flushed with anger. Despite her fury, she didn't chase back, only glaring at Mu Chen with a frustrated look. Be careful, Luo Li said with concern, though she knew this wasn't the time for hesitation. Mu Chen saw the two women retreat, and then his expression grew serious as he looked at the incoming spiritual light seal. Even with the strength of his current physical body, he could still feel a faint sting from that overwhelming power, a sign that his body sensed danger. Mu Chen took a deep breath and then swiftly made a grasping motion in the air. A brilliant light suddenly shot out from the top of his head. At the same time, a fierce and murderous aura spread out, and a demonic pillar shot straight into the sky from the light, the Great Xun'er Demon Pillar. The Great Xun'er Demon Pillar grew rapidly with the wind, quickly transforming into a massive, hundreds of meters tall structure. The terrifying aura of death spread across the entire area. Mu Chen held his hands out as though embracing the massive Great Xun'er Demon Pillar, then threw a punch, landing heavily on the bottom of the pillar. Boom! The murderous energy surged, and the Great Xun'er Demon Pillar seemed to turn into a beam of malevolent light, crashing directly into the approaching light seal. Boom! The air in the sky seemed to explode at that moment. The shockwave spread, and even the surrounding thorn trees, as tough as iron, were shattered. Countless iron spikes shot out like a torrential downpour, ravaging the ground and leaving it in ruins. In the sky, Mu Chen quickly retreated, his face pale. Although he had blocked the powerful attack of the Spirit Hall using the great Xun'er demon pillar's force, he had also been injured by the shockwave. Nearby, Mou and Qingxuan watched the battle closely. When they saw that Mu Qian had actually blocked such a powerful strike from the Spirit Hall, their faces darkened, and a trace of fear flashed in their eyes. They knew that if it had been them, they probably wouldn't have been able to stop it. This bastard, he's been hiding so much strength. Qingxuan gritted his teeth. Even if he's hiding strength, he still can't be the Spirit Hall's match, Mou said coldly. In midair, Mu Qian summoned the great Xun'er demon pillar back, and his body rapidly retreated. His face grew increasingly serious. The Spirit Hall's strength at the triple divine soul tribulation level was stronger than he had anticipated. The battle with the combat puppet on Spirit Treasure Mountain was nothing compared to facing this Spirit Hall. Whoosh! Just as Mu Qian's gaze flickered, a sharp sound of wind breaking reached his ears. His pupils contracted sharply as the Spirit Hall suddenly appeared right before him, its hollow eyes locking onto him. Watch out! Luoli and Wen Qingxuan's faces changed as they urgently called out. The Spirit Hall attacked decisively, not giving Mu Qian much time to react. Its hand reached out, and it seemed to form a terrifying spiritual energy vortex under its palm, releasing an astonishing wave of power. The spiritual energy vortex ripped and tore, making it impossible for Mu Qian to escape. Damn it! Mu Qian gritted his teeth, a fierce glint flashing in his black eyes. He was about to unleash the demonic energy within the great Xun'er demon pillar when the spiritual energy vortex paused just a foot from his face. A faint light flickered in the Spirit Hall's hollow eyes as a murmuring voice echoed, "Are you the successor?" That soft murmur made Mu Qian freeze. He realized that the Spirit Hall was looking at the ancient tree mark on his forehead, a mark given to him by the white-haired elder on Spirit Treasure Mountain. Outside the Spirit Treasury Hall, the overwhelming spiritual energy fluctuations suddenly quieted down, and the powerful pressure emanating from the Spirit Hall's body receded like a tide. The Spirit Hall's hand, still filled with powerful spiritual energy, remained suspended in front of Mu Qian without striking. Its hollow eyes seemed to be staring at him, but Mu Qian knew it wasn't him it was looking at. It was the ancient tree mark on his forehead, left by the white-haired elder from Spirit Treasure Mountain. Mu Qian's mind stirred, and the great Xun'er demon pillar floated behind him. His body remained tense, ready to flee at a moment's notice if the Spirit Hall made any move against him. Thankfully, the situation he feared didn't arise. The Spirit Hall remained in front of him, its hollow eyes glowing with light, but its hostility seemed to have vanished. Luoli and Wen Qingxuan, who had been preparing to assist Mu Qian, stopped at this moment. What's going on? The two women exchanged a glance, both seeing a trace of confusion in each other's eyes. What's going on? Mou and Qingxuan asked the same question, though their voices were tinged with a darker tone, as they vaguely sensed something was amiss. Under the intense gazes from everyone, Mu Qian saw that the hall spirit showed no further intention to act, and he gradually relaxed. Then, he saw the hall spirit slowly bowing towards him, its hollow voice echoing, "Identity confirmed. The successor is qualified to enter the Spirit Treasury Hall." "Successor? Are you talking about me?" Mu Qian asked, his heart racing slightly. "You bear the divine tree mark. That is the sign of a successor." The hall spirit's voice remained hollow, yet it carried no hostility. "So, I can enter the Spirit Treasury Hall?" Mu Qian's lips twitched slightly. He forced down the surge of excitement rising in his chest and pointed towards the Spirit Treasury Hall. The hall spirit nodded slowly. An overwhelming surge of joy erupted in Mu Qian's eyes, causing him to unconsciously chuckle. The situation had changed so rapidly that even he felt like it was surreal. Originally, they should have been forced to retreat, but who would have thought? He suddenly became the successor and was now qualified to enter the Spirit Treasury Hall. Mu Qian turned his gaze towards Mou and the others, who were hiding within the Spirit Treasury Hall's perimeter, his eyes gleaming with mockery. The others seemed to sense something, their faces turning ashen. Luoli and Wen Qingxuan also cautiously approached Mu Qian, But the hall spirit showed no reaction to their approach, simply standing quietly in front of Mu Chen like a loyal servant. On that spiritual treasure mountain, that white-haired elder left me this thing. And then the hall spirit referred to me as the successor, Mu Chen explained with a slight smile when he saw the confusion in the two women's eyes. Luoli and Wen Qingxuan were both left dumbfounded, and soon after, Wen Qingxuan couldn't help but grit her teeth and angrily say, "Is the Wood Divine Temple your family's? Why does all the good fortune fall to you?" Luoli nodded with deep sympathy. After entering the Wood Divine Temple, Mu Chen had obtained the rare 9-sun spirit fungus from Spiritual Treasure Mountain, and now he had become some sort of successor. All these sudden windfalls truly left one speechless. Mu Chen awkwardly rubbed his nose and said, "This was also something I fought for with my life, you know? I almost got taken out by this hall spirit just now. Since the hall spirit listens to your commands, can you make it kick those guys out?" When Qingxuan pointed to the group from the Alliance of Academies hiding within the Spirit Treasury Hall, her expression unfriendly. Mu Chen smiled, eyes narrowing as he looked at the pale-faced Mou and the others. "Looks like the one who gets the last laugh is me after all. You? What do you want?" Mou shouted, but his pale face lacked any intimidation. Clearly, he was filled with panic, unable to understand why the hall spirit suddenly obeyed Mu Chen's orders. "Get out," Mu Chen said with a slight smile. "Dream on." Mou roared, then abruptly turned around and slapped the door of the Spirit Treasury Hall, intending to get the supreme spiritual liquid and quickly leave with his people. Bang! However, as soon as his palm made contact with the door, a burst of light erupted from it. A terrifying force shot out, sending Mou flying backward. Mou's body flew back, a mouthful of blood spraying out. How could this happen? Didn't we break the seal here? Qin Feng and the others exclaimed in shock. The Spirit Treasury Hall can only be entered by the successor. If outsiders enter recklessly, they will be killed without mercy. The hall spirit's cold, hollow voice echoed. Mu Chen was also slightly stunned. The things in the Wood Divine Temple were no easy pickings. If he hadn't mysteriously met that white-haired elder earlier, even if they had dealt with Mou and the others, they wouldn't have been able to enter the Spirit Treasury Hall. The hall spirit's strength was formidable. The triple divine soul tribulation level was still extremely challenging for them at this point. "I'll give you two choices," Mu Chen said, his smile widening as he looked at Mou and the others. "Either you make your people leave, or I let the hall spirit take action." The expression on Mou and the others' faces changed, and just as they were about to sneer and refuse, they noticed Mu Chen's gaze slowly turning cold, causing a chill to run through their hearts. While the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition had its own rules, if Mu Chen really wanted to take action, he had enough means to make sure they wouldn't be able to leave. Based on their understanding of Mu Chen, this guy certainly didn't seem like the type to show mercy. "Mu Chen, we'll take this as a loss," Mou said, his gaze flickering. "How about this? We'll split the treasures from the Spirit Treasury Hall between us. From now on, consider your group friends of the Alliance of Academies. If you ever need help, we'll definitely assist you." Mu Chen smiled at him and slowly but firmly shook his head. He knew Mou well, a greedy and treacherous person. Even if they split the treasures now, once they found an opportunity, they would still try to bite back. "Your time is running out," Mu Chen said coldly. Mou's face darkened significantly. He glanced at Qin Feng and the others. Although the Alliance of Academies had many members, they all appeared demoralized and lacking any fighting spirit, which led him to reluctantly wave his hand. Seeing his gesture, the members of the Alliance hiding within the Spirit Treasury Hall also scrambled out in a disorganized fashion. They cast fearful glances at Mu Chen and his companions before standing far away from them. Qin Feng and Lu Xiong stood behind Mou, their faces as grim as if their father had just died. "Let's go." Mou glared fiercely at Mu Chen and waved his hand, signaling his people to leave. "Wait," Mu Chen smiled. "What more do you want? Are you going to kill us all?" Mou sneered. There were rules in the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition, and if they all died here, the spiritual academies they belonged to would not let it slide. Normally, in the competition, there was a baseline rule. No one dies. While killing all of you might cause some trouble, I think crippling the three of you should still be within the rules, Mu Chen replied indifferently. Mou and his companions trembled slightly. Looking at Mu Chen's emotionless face, they had no choice but to lower their heads and concede. What exactly do you want? Hand over the divine wood steel you're holding. Mu Chen extended his hand. He remembered that the old white-haired man had told him to gather all 6 divine wood steel, as each one contained a small divine art. If the 6 were fused together, they would form a powerful divine technique in the wood divine temple. Mou's eyes immediately burned with anger upon hearing Mu Chen demand the divine wood steel. Mu Chen extended his hand, his gaze cold as he stared at Mou. Spiritual energy surged around his body. Beside him, Luoli and Wen Qingxuan also cast unfriendly looks at him. You're ruthless. This matter will be remembered by the Wood Divine Temple. Mou forced down his fury and threw out a harsh word. Then, with a flick of his hand, a green light shot towards Mu Chen. Mu Chen caught it. The light faded, revealing a divine wood steel. He nodded in satisfaction. Go! Mou glared at Mu Chen one last time and waved his hand, heading for the forest's edge. Behind him, the members of the alliance followed with their tails between their legs. They had lost face this time. Mu Chen watched as Mou and his group hurriedly left, a trace of regret in his voice. It's a shame about that divine wood guard. He had wanted to take that divine wood guard as well, but he knew that doing so might push Mou and the others to fight desperately. Moreover, he realized that even if he got his hands on that divine wood guard, he wouldn't be able to control it, since the rune seal that controlled it was extremely perfect, unlike the broken ones he had encountered before. They're so upset, they're probably on the verge of tears, Wen Qingxuan said with a playful laugh. Bad guys always have to deal with their own kind, Mu Chen smiled. You can't afford to be nice to people like them. Quick, open the spirit treasury hall. I want to see how much supreme spiritual liquid the Wood Divine Temple left behind, Wen Qingxuan said, eagerly eyeing the spirit treasury hall. Mu Chen nodded in agreement. He too was filled with anticipation. As Mu Chen turned his gaze toward the spirit treasury hall, the hall spirit waved its hand. A rainbow light shot out and struck the thick, closed door. As the light passed, intricate and extremely complex runes appeared on the door. As the light runes emerged, Mu Chen and the others saw the heavy wooden door, which had been tightly shut for countless years, slowly begin to open.